All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Intentionally and Friends Book Club. Well, I'm actually not intentionally in studios today. I am calling in from Texas, so it's a pleasure to have all of you on today. We're excited to have you with us for today's conversation for our special guest. We have Shana Orczyk Sissel, CAIA, author of Tough Minded: How Taking Life's Challenges Can Make You a Better Investor, which will be available this November through Amazon and other major booksellers. Before we dive into today's discussion, let me introduce myself and share a few quick housekeeping items. My name is Ashley Taylor. I'm a senior director here at Intentionally, and I'll be your host for today's book club. And I'm here to welcome Shana. I'm so happy to have you here today with us.
I'm very happy to be here, and may she rest in peace. I thank Tina Powell for coordinating this and introducing us as well. She was very adamant that I should be on the book club, and that was one of the last things she did before she passed. So love Tina very much, and I'm very grateful for her for making this introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do also within that, I want to say, as always, thank you to Kelly for envisioning this and Tina for really driving this home. Tina being on the first two seasons of book club, creating this mission and just noting that even though she's no longer with us, the passion behind everything she does is still driving our mission professionally, within intentionally, and also personally. I love Tina very, very much. And I always say she was one of those people that if you're having the worst day in the world, she'll always make you believe in yourself. So this one is definitely for Tina. And even reading your book, one of the first things that got me really excited was when the dedication in the beginning,
Yep.
she was there. So
Yep. I dedicated the book to her and my late fiance.
yeah. And she's here and he's here as well. Joe, I believe his
Yep.
name is.
Yep.
All right, so let's dive in. Just want to drop a few different housekeeping things today as we move through this conversation. Well, like if you have anyone here, as always, if there's anyone that comes to mind who is releasing a book within this industry, definitely connect with us at Intentionally and pass over this information. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube, definitely want to do that so that if you miss anything from today, you can follow up and watch any of the episodes that will be live on YouTube before the end of this week. And then additionally, just want to always make this known that we are not giving financial advice specific to your situation. If there's guidance that you are looking for, please connect with your financial advisor or seek a financial advisor who can address any of these things that come to mind. Throughout today's session, we will select attendees who stay on for the entirety of the session for a $50 Amazon gift card. So definitely stay on, listen to all the amazingness that will be coming your way as we review Shana's book. And then also that person who gets that $50 gift card will also get a complimentary copy of Shana's book once it is live in November. And then finally, I want to just give you a little bit of a taste, give you some information around who Shana is. Obviously, we know who the Queen of Alternatives is, but if you don't know, you are going to know after this. So she is the founder and CEO of Baron Capital Management and is widely known throughout the financial industry as the Queen of Alternatives. With more than 25 years of experience in wealth and asset management, she has held leadership roles in firms including Morgan Stanley, Fidelity Investments, Mercer, Orion Advisor Solutions, and the list goes on and on. Today, she helps independent financial advisors navigate alternative investments through education, portfolio strategy, and innovative technology. A frequent contributor, so you can not only just see her here, you can see her almost everywhere on CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox Business, and the Schwab Network. Shana is a respected thought leader known for making complex investment topics accessible and actionable. I am so excited to have you here. I feel very lucky because I got to read the book before everyone else, obviously. But reading the book, I just had, first of all, one of the things that you said, and I just wanted to address that. I can't get that out of my mind of when you noted one of your friends calling you a superhero and you not wanting that. Because it's like everything that your adversity that you experience, it's the life that you're living. So when you're pulling all of this together, I just love that analogy because it's more of one of those things that like, this is your truth versus a story. So with that being said, what made this the moment, the time, not only to talk about being a good investor, but also to pull in your life experience into one story for all to read?
Yeah, so I have had people tell me I should write a book for a really long time, like long before even the last 5 years. And I just never felt like I was somebody who warranted a book. Um, it also is one of those things that like I have enough going on in my life. If I'm going to write a book, I need to be compensated or like incentivized to do it. I wasn't just going to do it because I wanted to write a book. It really needed to be the right publisher, the right scenario, and to write it the way I wanted to write it. So I had no desire to write like a straight up investment book. It's not how I view the world. It's not even how I view investments. I always kind of view it through a more personalized eye. And that's also not how my brain works. I'm not an academic and I'm not writing an academic book, but I'm not like important or famous enough to write like a memoir. Like no one cares. No one knows who I am if they're outside of finance. So like I don't have any name recognition that could warrant a publisher being like, yes, we need to have her write a memoir. But I knew that I wanted to build something that was a combination of both. And so I think I achieved that. But the reason now is the time is a publisher reached out to me. How the book came to be is actually really funny. I wasn't looking to write a book, like I said. A lot of people had said I should write a book, but I wasn't out there going looking for a publisher. And I got a random LinkedIn message from an editor at Wiley asking me if I'd ever thought of writing a book. And I said, I have, but like, I don't really want to write an academic finance book. So like Wiley's kind of known for being more of an academic publisher. And I said, if I'm going to write this book, I want to write it on my terms. And so she helped me put together a book proposal and they loved my proposal, which I can't take full credit for. It was based on the premise of a blog post that was written about me when I worked at Orion. Orion used to always put out a blog post when they added new team members, and they would have like a freelance writer or journalist write it. And so she'd interview you, and then she'd kind of figure out how to frame the posts. You had almost no like influence over it, and it was really just her creative mind. So she wrote this post, and it was called Tough Minded, and it was about like how my life experience makes me a better investor. And I loved the concept, and I thought it would make a good concept for a book because it would be the like you don't have to be in finance for this book to make sense to you.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what I was going for. But if you are in finance, it still makes sense. And I wanted it to read kind of like a novel more than like a heavy academic finance book, but also leave you with things that you could take from your own life and your own experience and apply it to finance, and also make finance accessible to people who view it through an academic lens and feel like they're not good enough or they don't have, the knowledge or math skills to be successful in making investment decisions. So that's how it came to be. That's why I wrote it now. And it all kind of worked out nicely, having a major publisher be interested in publishing the book and also be willing to do it my way. And I'm really proud of the book. It wasn't that hard to write because it's my life story, and it's not that hard to take the life experiences I have and explain how they have shaped me to be an investor and why your life experiences can do the same.
Yeah. And I can definitely see that. That was one of the things that I enjoyed most was that it had this like high level thought leader concepts within the novel that gave the information about you also intertwined. But then like the other element that you're mentioning is financial literacy. Mm-hmm. And even as equipped as you can be, as you talk about your, not necessarily your trauma, but your experiences, like you said, help make you a better investor. So definitely came through for me. By the way, like I'm fangirling. So
oh, thank you.
Definitely enjoyed reading about you. So one of the stories I enjoyed most was that first half of your book of you talking about your uncle. And so just diving into that, a little bit about your parents too. Your story begins with humble roots, and you write about growing up in an immigrant family, and also both of your parents being civil servants, a lot of your family being in law enforcement, your mother being a teacher. Looking back, what values from your upbringing have the greatest influence on how you lead, invest, and define success today?
Well, I think the growing up in an immigrant family is an important one. And I think as I've become an adult and raising my own son, I get a perspective on that I don't know that I appreciated as a child. But the thing about growing up in an immigrant family is that they came to the United States because they wanted a better life, right? So they don't look at the United States the way a lot of people who have been here forever. They tend to be very grateful. They have some level of comparison of how it is elsewhere, where I think that really builds values internally that are unique. It also, just growing up in a household where English wasn't always the language spoken, even though I don't speak Polish fluently anymore because I haven't spoken it since to anybody with any consistency since my grandparents died in 1995. I still recognize it. There's still like phrases and things that I know off the top of my head. And I think there's also value in learning and having a multilingual household that you grow up in. And I'm very fortunate. My son's stepmother is from Mexico. She speaks Spanish, and so does his stepsister. Those Spanish is their first language. They also speak Italian. So now he is in a multilingual household, which I'm really excited about. Because I think there's value there. And I think, again, growing up in a household where people are not from the United States just has a perspective on the world that's just so different than people who like don't have a sense of comparison of why people would come here and why they would sacrifice the way they did for their families. I mean, my grandparents on both sides, they had very like hard labor jobs. And they may not have had to do that if they had stayed where they were, or maybe they would have. There's really no way to tell. But I can say that they were willing to do it because they saw the opportunities for not just themselves, but for their children. And that's why they came to the United States. And that's why they always saw the United States as like the land of opportunity in the way that we talk about it as a cliche. So I think that really did kind of frame how I look at the world differently than a lot of other people, because I see it through different eyes. I see it through different perspectives, and having that has helped me also as an investor because I'm inclined to see things through the eyes of the different perspectives of the people coming at the same problem, and they may have different viewpoints that come because of their different perspectives, and because I grew up with folks who left Poland for reasons that were different than the relatives that left Ireland. And then also my dad dealing with, I mean, Worcester's not a huge city, but it is a city that has a very fair share of crime. It's not necessarily the safest city. And, my dad was involved in a lot of that. We heard a lot of the stories, and I still have tons of family in law enforcement. I still hear all the stories. There's things that have happened to my family over the years, not all of them in the book. For example, my brother-in-law's partner's son figured out the code to his gun safe once and decided he wanted to play with dad's gun. And unfortunately, at the age of 12, he blew his head off. And that was something my family had to deal with. And that was in like 2018, 17, 18. And it's just, those are the kind of things you grow up around, you hear about. My dad having a gun in the house, I talk about it in kind of tongue in cheek in the beginning, like bullets in the junk drawer. Like, yeah, never fazed me, but people would be like, why are there bullets in your junk drawer? Why do you bring your lunch in evidence bags? I would go and, I could get things from my dad that were like police paint for my car and, things like that, that like, it's just so normal to me. But now in hindsight, looking back, it's so different. But it just gives you a perspective on the world, because I always used to say, I had a friend that I met when I got into finance, and she was from the South. Her family came from money. She went to Vanderbilt. And I remember telling her once, I was like, I can relate more to the homeless guy on the street than I can relate to what you had growing up. And now I deal with folks who are billionaires, and, I my fair share of opportunities to interact with folks that just don't come from that world. And it's just such a strange, like, viewpoint that I come from, whereas like there's the part of me that's like this very connected person to, people who have influence, make major decisions about the direction of the country and things of that nature. And then on the other end, I go home, like last week I was on the beach with my family, and they never cease to remind me that like I'm not that important, and like you don't come from this stuff, and don't even try to to pretend that you're in any way different than us. It doesn't matter what you do or who you know. Like, you're still just the kid who grew up in Worcester, who dealt with all the same things we did, and you're not better than us. And my brother is always quick to remind me of that. Like, the first thing we fought about in Maine was he was complaining about having to get McDonald's for the kids. He's like, I spent $70 for the kids to get McDonald's. And I was like, I paid for the house. And he's like, it's always about money for you. But like, it's one of those things where like, it's that constant reminder of like, I'm in that world, but I am not of that world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I honestly would, in my opinion, if we were going to go back to that idea of being a superhero, that would be your superpower, in my opinion, because you don't necessarily, if you're always within the same space or demographic or working with the same people, you don't understand how other people operate. And so it limits your purview. And I find that people who are multilingual, right? Like, I even challenged myself as an adult to start learning Spanish so that when my children are born, I can speak Spanish to them. And then eventually they'll have tutors, people who can take it to another level because of the expansion of the mind. So your mind is literally like expanding in ways and thinking about things in ways that other people literally don't have the mechanics, or the muscle hasn't been exercised. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because two things. One, it's very hard to have my son have a similar experience to mine, but one of the things I really appreciate about my ex-husband is he's a travel influencer. And my son has been to he's been to Egypt, he's seen the pyramids, he's been to Greece. So he's been all over the world, and now he does karate, and through karate, he travels a lot. A lot of his senseis are immigrants from Venezuela that don't speak English. So now having his step family from Mexico and Italy speaking another language, and then being around like his Venezuelan senseis, I just think it gives him this worldly view that like I never had, but my worldly view comes from a different setting than his, but it's still giving him that worldly view, which I think is really important to be successful in life and to be able to see multiple perspectives and not be so, narrow in your thinking. And I think that's really important. And then to your point about the superhero thing, the reason I don't like when people call me that, because so many people are like, you're like a real life superhero. Look at everything you've overcome. The problem with that is that it suggests that I didn't struggle and that it wasn't hard and that I didn't go to a dark place. And so sometimes when I am struggling and I go to a dark place, the people who see me that way have a really hard time, like that. I'm not supposed to be like that. I'm supposed to be bigger than that. I'm supposed to be more resilient than that and not like weak in any way. But the truth of the matter is that I'm just like everybody else. I go to those dark places. I need help getting out. There are times where I say I go into my cave when I'm struggling, where like you won't hear or see from me at all, or I'll take my media back and people will be like, you haven't been on TV in a while. I'm like, well, because I got other things I'm dealing with.
Break.
And that's a big thing about the whole superhero thing. Like my whole premise there is like, I'm not better at any of this than anyone. The only thing I have that I think makes me different is that I have grit and that I have this desire to be something more and to achieve something, that I don't let anything prevent me from continuing on that journey.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's one of the levels of humility, right? When you have humility and you're receiving all of the lessons and things that are being offered to you, you drive forward a lot differently. So in your chapter, Engineering a Different Life, I feel like this is the perfect segue. You share the profound influence your Uncle Stan, as I mentioned, had on your life. He taught you how to intentionally design your future rather than simply accepting the path in front of you. And he emphasized the importance of relationships and networking long before you entered finance. How did these early lessons shape the opportunities that followed? What advice would you give to someone trying to engineer a different life for themselves today?
So there's a couple of things. My Uncle Stan never had conversations with me. This was more observational than anything else. So my dad has an older brother who is really older. So obviously my dad was born, during a difficult period. He was born in 45. So, but my grandparents, I'd like to say they were old grandparents. They were born in like the early 1900s. So when my grandmother had my dad, she was in almost 40, if not 40 already. And so their first child was before the war and the depression, and then they didn't have kids because there was a war and a depression. So my uncle Stan is like 16 or 17 years older than my dad. There's like a massive age gap. He's almost 100. And so I never grew up around him because my dad didn't even grow up around him. He was like out of the house by the time my dad has any recollection of like life. He was like 4. And so he was just kind of like an ideal I heard about. I didn't see him very often. He was moving all over the country, taking jobs. He went to Brown. And I remember like conversations that I would overhear about him where there would be things said that maybe weren't meant complimentary necessarily, or were like out of frustration, where at the same time I was like, And one conversation I remember is somebody saying like, oh, Stan only hung out with the right people. He was always worried about hanging out with the right people. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that he thought he was better than anyone else. He just understood that in life, a lot of success comes from who you know. And you are the amalgamation of all the people you surround yourself with. Like, this is proven psychology. If you hang around with people that have no ambition or incentive or drive, then you won't either. Another one that's like, this is like clinically proven, is if all of your friends, if you hang around with a lot of people who get divorced, you're more likely to get divorced. Like, it's just, you are what you surround yourself with. And he understood that at a young age. And I remember thinking to myself, well, maybe there's something to that. And then being more deliberate about wanting to participate in activities that would broaden the types of people that I met. I talk about in one of my chapters doing pageants and why that was like so impactful for me. But that was like my first step into networking beyond, who I was around every day, around my immediate circle, and with people who are so very different from me, as an inspiration for what I became. But I've just found in my own life, like even being here today, talking to you, or having the opportunity to write the book, was all about like knowing somebody who knew somebody who was willing to open a door. And I think that in any aspect of life, you have to be intentional. If you know where you want to go, or you know how you want to change or be different from those who came before you, you have to be intentional with who you surround yourself with. And so I learned that a lot from my Uncle Stan. But again, not because he ever sat me down and talked to me about it so much as because I observed how his outcomes were so different from the family that I grew up in. And again, I never really saw him or talked to him or anything beyond my grandmother, like thinking he was like the prodigal son, and like my dad and his brother always being a little like begrudgingly like, she loves him more kind of thing. And then just knowing that like he drove a really nice car and he lived in a really big house, and my cousins went to nice things, and we occasionally got big checks on Christmas. And just knowing like, that seems like a path that I want to take. Like, why wouldn't I want to be like Uncle Stan? And so I have an article from the 80s that was written about him when he bought an oil company. And I keep it, like, I just have it hung up. It's actually in the book. And it's just one of those things that's just a reminder of like, you have goals, but in order to meet those goals, you have to be intentional about how you surround yourself. And it doesn't mean that you forget where you came from or that you're better than anybody else. It's just you have a different path you want to take. And to take that path, you have to do it different than the people who came before you or who surrounded you in the beginning. And I have a friend that played in the NFL that had to be intentional when he got to the NFL with who he stayed friends with. Like, you have to know the motivations of the people around you. And there is a point you have to have good boundaries. And again, it doesn't make you better, doesn't mean anything. It just means that like you understand the value of your boundaries, and you understand the goals and drive and path you want to be on, and you have to protect that fiercely.
Yeah. One of the things I've started saying in my 30s is boundaries are for me, not for you. Mm-hmm. And so as long as I know my boundaries and I respect them, if you decide not to, well, then I understand how the relationship actually can transpire or grow from. So completely agree with you. Yeah. So your life has had some interesting moments for sure. Two defining ones that you talk about is specific to American history is 9/11 and the Boston Marathon bombing. Both events found their way into your personal story and challenged your sense of certainty. How did these experiences reshape your perspective on resilience, risk, and the importance of continuing to move forward even when life changes unexpectedly?
So I was exposed to a lot of like bad things just because my dad was a cop, and even as a kid, I would be witness to things. You know, my family was intimately attached to the Worcester Cold Storage Fire in 1999 as well. So the being in Tower 2 on 9/11 is so wild to me. And then being within blocks of the Boston Marathon bombing, also wild to me. You know, people like to remind me, statistically speaking, like those are all separate statistical probabilities. It's not like because you had one that the statistics of having a second doesn't, nope, that's not how it works.
No, not at all.
But it still feels like, you know, I've been close to a lot of like historic events. And to your point about risk, it's that there's always a risk of things like that happening. It's how you assess the risk going forward, and whether or not it paralyzes you. And you see, even in the world, it didn't paralyze the world, it just changed it. And you have to take that information and use that when you are assessing risk of any kind. So, like, I can't go through life fearing that, like, every time I get on a plane, although there was a point in my life where, like, I could not physically get on a plane because I was so deep in PTSD. It you just have to sort of like realize that like there comes a point, and I think this even more so has impacted and influenced my life in the last 3 years, where like you got to live life like it's terminal for everybody. My ex-husband used to like to say that like everybody's terminal. You don't know when your last day is. In fact, there's something freeing about knowing kind of when your last day is to some extent, or knowing that your time is limited. And sometimes you have health scares or people around you who suddenly are taken from you in ways that were not predictable. That just makes you realize that, like, when you assess risk, you don't want to ignore that kind of risk, but you can't live your life like paralyzed by it. And I think in investing, that's the same.
Do you find that a lot of people who are investors or advisors are paralyzed by risk and don't take opportunities or jump too fast?
Yeah, I think that that is, and I think you have to be informed about risk. You shouldn't jump with complete ignorance or ignoring risk. But I think sometimes they're so paralyzed by the low probability event that they miss the opportunity and aren't willing to see the broad opportunity that could arise. And I think Alt is a great example of this. You know, the headlines are always scary, but my favorite book ever is a book called The Science of Fear that talks about like that's an intentional thing. Our lizard brain loves to fixate on what we see most often we think is most probable, and that's not always true. So I think kind of what I try to do is, this is just something I've done because of what I've been through, but anytime I have like a really strong emotional response to some stimuli, whether it be a headline or whatever, I go out of my way to look for the opposite viewpoint, because if it's creating such a strong emotional response, that is being done in a way to manipulate me. It's almost never being, they want you to have the strong emotional response because then you'll click on the link and then you'll, you know, do the thing that they want that benefits them. And so I've always tried to step back whenever I have that strong emotional response and think about the opposite. But I do that the other way too. Like if I love something a ton, I am more critical of it. In manager research, that's huge. There are managers out there that I personally love as human beings, and I have a very hard time seeing the negatives of their investment strategies sometimes, or, you know, playing the devil's advocate because I love them so much.
Yeah.
But it's the same idea.
Yeah, agreed. So within all of that, one of the quotes that I loved the most about from your book was resilience is not about being unbreakable. It's about continuing intentionally and with awareness after something has changed you, which is basically, kind of how do you drive forward after you have these experiences. So connecting this philosophy to investing, where success often most comes from navigating uncertainty rather than avoiding it. How does this definition of resilience influence both your investment philosophy and even when you're coaching people and having to help them through, maybe revising theirs? And what are the biggest challenges when it comes to this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. There's this psychologist that I know who used to say that in relationships in general, and investing in many ways is relationship oriented. It, every day, instead of saying how are you, you should ask who are you, because every day we have things that happen to us that change us just a tiny bit or maybe a large bit. It's not how somebody is, but who are you today? Like what happened to you today that either made you better or worse or whatever, changed you in some way. And I loved that. And I think that's true with investing, but I think what we just talked about, which is being willing to take that step back, that lens of understanding that your viewpoint is yours because of your life experience and other people have viewpoints for different reasons. And like, I see this so often. It's so common that people just, this is how I feel. And like, if you don't feel that way, then you're just wrong. And like 99% of the cases, if you actually listen to why they feel the way they do, it might actually change your viewpoint. And so when you're investing or you're working with people who are investing, it's really important to understand like where they're coming from, because you can't address their concerns about risk without understanding why they have the concern about the risk
100%.
and what brought them there. And so all of the things, whether it be the immigrant mindset we talked about, whether it be just, taking that moment to check yourself when you're being overly emotional and that like, okay, there's a reason I'm being overly emotional, and it's almost certainly because somebody wants me to be, because they have an action they want me to take. And there's more information that I need before I can take the next step. All of those things are things that when I talk to anybody, whether it be coaching for investing or coaching with relationships, you have to just be mindful of and willing to ask those questions, and also be willing to like just be honest about yourself. A lot of people ask like, why'd you write this book? It's super vulnerable. There's a lot of stuff in here that's like really raw. And it was like, well, I could pretend I'm perfect and try to cover up all of the rawness because I don't want people to use it against me, or I could be honest and authentic and touch more people while still understanding there's the risk that this information can be used in a way that's negative to me. I'm willing to do that because I think the pros outweigh the cons. And I think that's true with investing. That's true in relationships. And like that alone is an important aspect, that like, it's not like cut and dry. It's not black and white. There's gray area. And like your comfort in the gray area is what will make you most successful in life, is like being able to sit with that level of uncertainty, because literally everything's uncertain. Like at this very moment, a tree could fall in my house and, something could happen to me. So literally everything you do in life. My late fiance went to bed and didn't wake up.
And you said he was healthy, like took care of himself. Like you have to, and that's what people like, not to derail, but that's what I thought like when I was reading your book. I was like, she gets it. She gets the importance of living. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, what I've noticed, even experienced like the passing of Tina, I've experienced like loss this year, mm-hmm. That I've never experienced before. And that's what I keep getting to. That's what I keep coming back to, is you need to live. Right. And so many people may have experiences like you have, or myself, or whatever it might be, where they find these things cripple them to a point where they stop participating within life. And you just didn't do that. And
and I think that's true with everything. Like I always say, like, it's not that I don't have bad days. I absolutely have bad days. I just remind myself that like everything that I am doom spiraling on right now, about something that might happen 3 months from now. Like, I might not be here 3 months from now. Why am I letting this ruin my day today? Because something might happen 3 months from now. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Like, deal with it then. But why would you bring that doom spiraling and that negativity into your life today, when even if everything goes completely wrong, it's not affecting you in this moment right now? So live this moment right now and let what's going to happen in the future come to be however it's going to come to be, and then deal with it when you have to deal with it. And I think that in relationships, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, about marriage and friendships, and like how common it is for these things to just fall apart. But I think it comes from this expectation that people are going to be like what we envision them to be, and they're not flawed human beings like we're flawed human beings.
Yeah.
And we don't give people a lot of credit. Like, I've certainly had friendships that have been challenging or that fell apart, where it's not that they're a bad person or I'm a bad person. It's just they went through something and they just couldn't, the way that I go about my life didn't work for them, or it wasn't personal. I still love them personally. It's just there was something that because every relationship in some sense is transactional. You get something from it. What they needed or wanted from me, I couldn't give them, and didn't want to give them, because of boundaries. And I hold no ill will. I wish them the best, but that's just life, right? And it's the same thing in investing. It's the same thing of, I think I say this in the book, I would rather miss something and be wrong, have it go like parabolic and be wrong about that, than like ignore my intuition on something else. Manish Kata, who runs Potomac Funds, I don't know if you know Manish. My first interaction with him, I'm pretty sure he hated me, but I was working at Orion, and he was very good friends with Eric Clark, and he wanted to get his stuff on Orion, and I was the gatekeeper, and I said no. And he was so mad. He's like, "What do you mean no?" Like, and I said, "Look, it's nothing personal. I have like these check boxes and you didn't check them. And like, check them. I'll help you check them." And now I look at what he's achieved, and like some of the feedback I gave him, he told me I was full of it and he wasn't going to listen to me, and he didn't, and he did it his way. And it's one of the reasons he succeeded. And I think you have to have some of that in you. The contrarian mindset I talk about, being willing to stand alone in a crowd that's going completely against you. I think Manish is a great example of that. And being authentic, because you're never going to make everybody happy. The more you try, the less you're living a truly authentic life. And you'll be pretty miserable too, because you're not doing what's fulfilling for you. Yeah. And investing is the same way, right? Like, you might be wrong, but if you've done the work and you feel strongly about it and you're willing to take the risk, like, you shouldn't decide that not to do it because a whole bunch of other people says you shouldn't. And like, he's a perfect example of that. And now he's multi-billion-dollar firm, growing so fast, super successful, got on the Orion platform, now on all sorts of other platforms, because he said, "Look, I'll take some of what you're saying, and I think that's good feedback, but some of what you're saying I disagree with, and I'm going to do it my way, and you can take it or leave it, and I'm going to do it. And if it fails, it fails, but at least I took the chance of doing it in a way that was fulfilling to me, and it worked." And he's been somebody that I've looked at and thought, like, he's a perfect example of why being authentic and being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to say, "No, this is how I'm going to do it, whether you like it or not," is good, and made him successful. And that's what makes a lot of people successful. You have to be willing to, not to have people dislike you. If they like you, you're not doing it right. But also being willing to do it your way. I think authenticity is the key to success in anything, including investing. And like I said, I love alts. Alts, authentically, to me, not everybody loves them, and I get a lot of hate for some of it. And people accuse me of like pushing stuff that's bad for people, but like, that's fine. I just know that it works for me. I've been successful as an investor. I manage product that has very strong track records, and that's good enough for me. And in anything you do in life, including investing, like taking it, the willingness to go against the grain, to be contrarian is valuable, and that comes through authenticity.
100%. And many people don't ever take that step where they try to comply to what,
Mhm.
again, to their audience, to what they've received or have seen in the past. So I'm going to push our first polling question, which is around this. Which quality do you believe contributes most to long-term success? You'll see the answers pop up. So if you have a moment as we move through the conversation, continue to fill that out. But my next question is, there was a moment when your life accelerated without warning and took you to Seattle. While joining a hedge fund wasn't originally a part of your dream, that unexpected opportunity introduced you to the world that eventually would earn you the title of Queen of Alternatives. So around 2027, 2028. Yeah, just as quickly as the chapter began, it changed. What have those unexpected pivots taught you about embracing opportunities when the path doesn't feel linear?
So I've had that happen so many times. Moving to Seattle to work for a hedge fund when what I really wanted to be was a stock analyst and run my own mutual fund someday, knowing that doing that would take me on a different path, and doing it anyway because why not? It seemed interesting and it was something I didn't know. And then losing that job like within a year because of the financial crisis, then having to come home and actually being offered my dream job. Like I got offered a job to cover consumer retail stocks at MFS, and I turned it down to take this job at a small RIA running building an alts platform. But that's what took me on the media side. That's where I got all the media stuff came from that, and all of this Queen of Alts thing came from that decision. I think being open-minded to new and different ways, and accepting that the path you think you should be on is not always the path that you are supposed to be on. Going through my own like mortality issues has led me to believe that like we're all here for a purpose, and what we think is our purpose and what is actually our purpose are not always one and the same. And when we're trying to go down a road that is not meant for us, like God or the universe or whoever, they will close that door and make it as hard for you as possible. Starting Bonrian is a perfect example of that. I have no desire to be an entrepreneur. None. Like it was, we talk about managing risk, like the risk of entrepreneurship and inability to support myself financially or my son, and that financial instability is terrifying to me. And I didn't want to do it. And everybody kept telling me that I should do it. And I kept saying, I'm not important enough. I don't have enough cachet. No one would ever invest in me. How would I ever build anything? Like, I'm not somebody that has that. And them just being like, no, you should. And me just refusing until I lost my job so many times. In 1 year, I lost my job 4 times. It was unbelievable. And it also left the impression that there was something wrong with me to the marketplace, right?
That's what it feels like when this happens. So
yeah, the people kind of all of a sudden, people who were willing to help you the first time don't want to help you because they're like, what am I missing here? How does somebody do this? And it's not them. But in reality, it really was just bad timing, the universe saying, no, you need to start your own shop. And that is what brought me to start my own shop, because it got to the point where like nobody was willing to take a chance on me anymore. So kind of had no other choice. And then it took off almost immediately. I had investors and clients, and it was hugely successful right from jump. But then I got sick. And then once I got sick, everything stopped. It no longer was as successful. It was so much harder. And it made me question, like, was I even supposed to do this? What was the whole point? But then I realized that, like, it was that journey and the realization that, like, you took the risk. It was successful. Things outside of your control have now made what you're doing harder. I can't get people to invest in my company because I can't get Keyman Insurance, and everybody, my company is in many ways me, and I have a terminal illness. So like, I don't view myself as terminal, but like the reality is that the world sees me that way. And that makes me a really hard risk to take on something that's already pretty risky. And so, we've had to bootstrap and find good partnerships and do things differently to continue to succeed. And we continue to do so. But it got way harder after I got sick. And I found myself wondering, like, why? I had all this success. I felt like I was on the right track. Finally felt like I figured it out. And then like all of it was taken from me like virtually overnight, and I couldn't understand why. And now I'm finally getting out of that dark place because I just accepted that like maybe that wasn't the path I was supposed to take. It was just part of what I needed to do to get on the path that I'm ultimately supposed to be on, which is writing the book. It's the TV show I have now called Franchise Value. It's the having this company and having this technology I built and working directly with the advisors, and even if it's a little slower, but being more deliberate about the relationships that I build and the partnerships that we decide to do and who we decide to work with. I'm not beholden to some private equity firm or venture capital firm who wants to tell me what to do. It hasn't always been easy, but it's helped me get to this point. And I think that is a big part of it. Like every pivot in your life is teaching you a lesson, and you don't really get to understand what the lesson was until you get past the pivot point to wherever you're supposed to go. And you have to look back in hindsight. But I think just a reminder that I've learned over the last 5 years, really, that like every time something horrible has happened in my life, as I look back, I kind of wrote them all down once and was like, this is every horrible thing that's happened to me in my life and how horrible I felt at that time. And what did it lead to? And there's never been something horrible that's happened to me in my life, no matter what it looked like or how people judge me for it, that didn't lead to some better outcome down the road.
100%. So again, not to derail, but one of the things that I always talk about in my yoga classes in the beginning, when I first graduated college, I was a preschool teacher, love kids. They are like my pride and joy. Till this day, like that's why my nephews are so important to me. But one of the things that I started to connect, and I was in my early 20s and I was going through a really hard time in my life, was that the kid books that I would read essentially had the lessons and the values that you needed to survive as an adult. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I always quote is, it's called "We're going on a bear hunt" or going through, and it's always like you can't go over it, you can't go under it, but you got to go through it. And when any one of my friends were like going through it, and I hate bringing it up, but it's truly what you need to do because you can't stop. You have to go through it. And the lessons and sometimes the blessings that you receive lead you into that next journey of your life.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the next question that I have for you. You mentioned discussing breast cancer. One of the things that you highlight in the book is your cancer spreading into your spinal cord and the pressure and that you physically felt and what landed you in the hospital for 16 days having to learn how to walk. You share these images. You're very vulnerable and very raw about this as well. So when it comes to that, all of that being said, you write that the risk that matters most is the one that presents no signal. Because your quote in the book was when you had hurt your back or you bent down for something, I believe you said it was you like attribute it to getting older, but it really was something deeper happening in your body. How did this experience redefine the way that you think about uncertainty? I know we're diving into this a little bit further, not with just investing, but in life as well.
Yeah, so Tina was like my North Star during that period because I talked to her a lot. Because it's really hard not to go to like a mentally dark place. And my doctor talks about this all the time. I was so vehemently and flamboyantly like unwilling to like accept what they were telling me that she's like, that was part of why you succeeded. I actually was talking to somebody the other day. I have stayed away from support groups, from charitable organizations related around breast cancer. And it's not because I don't care, but I am so vehemently protective of my mental health space. And it is so easy to, because of the way that I've recovered, become sort of like something people like come after. Like, why you? Why are you special? Like, why did my mom have to die, but you get to live? Like, why? You're not more important. And I got a lot of that. And the support groups, it is easy to spiral, right? Like you get a terminal illness and you just start accepting like, okay, well then I guess I'm going to die. And then that thought process in and of itself kind of brings the health stuff worse and kind of brings you to the outcome that you just decided is your outcome. And I just didn't agree. I remember coming back from the hospital, I get my eyelashes done because I have like mascara really irritates my eyes. And so and the woman who owns the lash place I go to was like, "Oh, I canceled your membership." And I was like, "Why?" She's like, "Well, because you got bigger problems." I'm like, "No, I'm gonna get my
Oh, you
lashes
have our
done. I'm gonna
lashes
go
done.
I'm gonna go get my nails done. I'm gonna get a facial, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna show up at radiation and chemotherapy looking like I own the place." Going into a cancer center is the most depressing thing ever. Everybody
Yeah.
there is like, they've already decided they're gonna die.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I'm not gonna die. I'm gonna be fine, and I'm gonna live my life. My hair is going to be done. My nails are going to be done. My skin's going to look amazing. I'm going to show up in the flashiest outfits ever, full makeup, because nobody else here is living that way. And like, just my energy was like affecting the people around me in the waiting rooms and the radiologists and, the women who gives me my injections and my infusions is always like, "Where did you get that outfit? Like, what color nails is that?" Like, my socks became a thing, and that became a thing with Tina too. Because when she relapsed, I sent her my socks. That I have these socks that have these like wildly inappropriate sayings on them, but like it became a joke. And I go to my oncologist check-ins, and I always look like $1,000,000, and they always are like, "You always look amazing." I'm like, "Should I not? Like, am I supposed to
No,
just
as you
decide that
should.
no? My life is over," and I just don't think that that's way. So I am fiercely protective of the energy around me, and I will not allow people to be around me who are in that state of mind, which is why I've stayed away from a lot of those things. But I think to your point is that like, I don't know that I was constant worrier. I was constantly like thinking about the worst all the time before I got sick. And then after I got sick, it was like, why? Like, decisions I'm making today, I remember saying to somebody the other day, like, "I'm miserable. This is not the life I want to live. Like, I'm going to like not work as hard. I'm going to go to the beach when I want to. I'm going to read what I want to read, do what I want to do, because yeah, maybe it's not going to make my business $1 billion business, but like, I don't know how much time I have left. I want to focus on building and growing and supporting the relationships of the people that matter to me. I want to watch my son do as much as possible with his school, karate, whatever it is that he's passionate about. I want to live my best life and not constantly be worrying about what I owe other people or how I'm disappointing somebody else. Like, I can't let am I disappointing me? Am I doing what I think is right? Am I doing what fulfills me? Even if maybe it's not what somebody else would want from me. Like, I just think that like when you become ill, and Tina taught me that. Like, Tina
Yeah.
got on the phone with me and was like, "No, I mean, a month or so before she passed, she was at Future Proof, and no one was the wiser that like she'd be gone in a few months. Like,
He
she
had
never
when he,
lived like, you should feel bad for me because I'm sick." And even
yeah.
when she decided to go into hospice, I remember texting her and being like, "Just come visit me when you pass. Like, I know you'll still be there. I know you're doing what you think is right for yourself." And she was never like, she may have been in pain, she may have been, but she never like let that onto the world because she wanted to live her best life, and no one was going to tell her like, "You shouldn't go to Future Proof because you only got 2 months to live." If anything, 2 months to live was the reason she went to Future
Right.
Proof. Like, it's just, you got to focus on the things that actually matter for you, which is the relationships with the people around you, especially the ones that are there for the right reasons. And you find out real quick who's there for the right reasons and who's not. And sometimes you get surprised. And who is there for what you can do for them versus anything else. And fostering those relationships, spending time with those people, and just embracing all of that is such a huge thing that I learned through all of this. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know Joe was going to be gone, and we got in a huge fight before he died, and I have to live the rest of my life knowing that one of the last things I said to him was not that nice. So now I tell people who don't want to hear it that I love them. Like,
Yeah.
I don't care that it makes you uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if I'll get to say this to you again. And
100%.
oh well, you're just gonna have to deal with it. And Tina was like that too.
Tina, if Tina was fierceless in all the things that she did, and I remember one of my first conversations when I started out intentionally, we were going over a project and just the animation and the excitement that she had over this one pager brought me so much joy because you should be excited about the things that you're doing every day. And at the end of the day, right, if we dumb it all down, like on my end, like I do marketing, but Tina breathed life into it and always made sure that you understood that it's not just marketing. You were
Right.
creating a brand. You were expanding the awareness of who these people are and essentially building a business. And that ideology or a mindset can be applied to life. And so I love your connection to Tina just because, as you know, like Tina means so much to intentionally, but
Mhm.
it's one of those things that like when you find a person now, if I found someone on the street that knew who Tina Powell was, I would just be excited for a moment to talk about her light because all of these things that you're saying and all the lessons that she laid upon us, like that is the truth of not just staying stuck in the mud, essentially. Like
Yeah,
what
she
is
never
necessary?
let her diagnosis keep her from living her best life. And
No.
she made decisions on what she wanted to do with her life because she wanted to make sure that she lived every day with joy, right? And it's impossible to live every single day with joy, but like the ability to let things go is a superpower in and of itself, and to just start every day fresh and anew and find joy in every day, even on the bad days, I think is something that Tina like exemplified in life. And her work with intentionally, Tina had done a lot of different things, but it was intentionally that brought her joy through her career goals. Like, and that wasn't always the case for her. And what I'm doing now and some of the pivots that I'm making and things that'll hopefully be announced in the near future, is a decision I'm making to do the same. Like, I don't want to deal with this all the time. Like, this isn't bringing me joy. This is causing me pain. It's taxing my relationships. And I don't need or want that in my life. And that means that I have to pivot, and find what brings me joy. And that's what it's all about. And Tina taught me that. And when I was in my dark place, she was the one who sent me the angel and told me that you cannot live as if you're dying. That in the way that I was in the dark place. Like, that should make you want to live with more purpose and joy than less. And I think so many people just go to the dark place and never come out.
Yeah, because you have to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hard part. The
It's
hard,
really hard. Your mind
so
is
hard.
your mind is like, it's programmed to try to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And I read something recently. Every decision I've made in my medical journey, I've fought back on my doctor on quality of life stuff. Now, every decision I've made has worked out for me so far, knock on wood. But every decision I've made isn't necessarily, if it gives me more time, will the time I have be time that I want, right?
Or time
If
well
I
spent.
am, if I am going to be miserable and sick and just alive to be alive, like, is that really living? And
Right.
Tina exemplified, she wanted to live. She didn't just want to be alive.
Yeah. There's something that we have to differentiate between this is my healthy years and these are the years of like the length of life. Like those are two different
Yep.
very different things that we live. Um, Thank you for sharing that, especially about Tina too, and about yourself and your journey. So, just a few more questions for you, but your career has been built in an industry where there weren't always many women in leadership positions. We even started off talking about like you working with Kelly and having just three powerful women in one room and seeing what that felt like. Yet you've become one of the most recognizable voices in alternative investments. What advice would you give to women who are navigating industries where they may be underestimated or may feel pressure to conform instead of lead authentically to themselves?
Don't make yourself small to help other people feel big, and don't change like who you are authentically because it will help you get a job. Like, I spent most of my 20s trying to overcome what I look like because no one took me seriously. And then I realized there was no amount of baggy clothing and lack of makeup that was going to make anybody take me any more seriously. So then I was just like, I'm just going to be me. And then I leaned into it super hard, which still gets me hate. But this is who I am. Like, I am always extra. I like to be flashy. I've been like that since I was a toddler, and I was on stage and dancing and singing and wanting to be in the spotlight. Like, that's been who I am at my core since I was a child. So why am I trying to shrink that aspect of me? Just because it makes others uncomfortable and people think I'm dumb.
Yeah, that's their problem.
That's their problem. And I think women in general in our industry, and it's getting better, but it's still there. There's just the women's intersexual like competition in life comes through even in career stuff. And like, we need to do a better job not viewing every other woman who's in a position that we want to be in as like our obstacle that we need to take out to get there. Men don't do that. There's always my success does not take away from your success. And I want to be able to help you, but I also need to be able to trust that you're not the entire time scheming for my downfall because you want what I have.
Right.
That's not how it works. And I think women, in a way, get that way in career. I definitely have run into it with female bosses that I've had. And I think we need to do a better job, but I think it's changing. And I think Kelly and I are a great example of that. Like, we definitely clashed when we first started working together because we both are very strong, opinionated women, and like, who does she think she is kind of thing. But it turned into a healthy level of respect, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that being jealous of what somebody else has achieved or judgment, I tell a lot of young women that like, you liking yourself and being confident is not that's not a negative, right? Even though society teaches us that we should always be like, we're not good enough. I mean, the makeup industry, whatever, you know, you gotta have a man. If you're single and you're my age, like, what's wrong with you? Who do you think you are?
All these things.
All
Like
these things, like, yeah, there's entire industries that are built on making women feel like they're not enough.
Yeah.
And that makes other women look at women who feel like they're enough as like, she's full of herself. Like,
Yep.
And I think we need to realize that like, that is the North Star we should all be striving for. And instead of looking for ways to like take her out and take her down a notch, we should instead be like on that path of what did you do to get to that point, right? How did you get past all of the obstacles and the industries that are set in front of you that tell you that you're not enough to make you feel like you're enough? And for me, it was getting a terminal diagnosis. But I think that we're evolving, and I think we're getting better at it. And as an industry, I definitely see positive things happening with women mentoring women, but also there are plenty of men out there that want to help women, and we need to see that as well, and we need to educate them. I remember telling Vesti Vanneman, my old boss, he said something once that I found incredibly offensive, but instead of holding it against him and hating him for it, I went up to him and I was like, you know how incredibly sexist it is that you said that? He's like, I don't understand. I thought I was helping you. And the thing was, he didn't ask me to go to a conference because he didn't think I'd want to take time away from, at the time, my son was only like 3.
Yeah.
Like, you're a mom and you want to spend time with your kid. Like, okay, maybe, but also, don't you think that I'm the person that has the right to make that decision, not you deciding it for me? I understand it was coming from a good place, but you didn't do that to the other guy who also has a toddler because you just assumed his wife would take care of it. Like, I might say no, but I should have the right to make that decision because maybe I'd say yes. Maybe I have I feel differently. Maybe I have a nanny, or in my case, my ex-husband was an influencer and he worked from home, and so he had a lot of flexibility. But like, people have the right to make decisions that are best for them. And in that case, I think women, a lot of times, people think they're doing something to be thoughtful for women. In actuality, it's just running into the same thing. And I think we're getting better as an industry, but the more women are willing to work with men and that want to get better, and the more we're willing to work with each other and realize that we're all on the same team, and my success doesn't take away from your success or mean that you can't be successful, None of that is true. I think the better we get as an industry, and I see it happening every day.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, point out that you said was you held him accountable.
Yep.
And I think that really is where it comes down to. It's holding each other accountable for decisions and actions, because that is the true way that we actually learn, versus you internalizing that on your end and then going home. And I think a lot of times we as women do that because we don't want to like ruffle the feathers, especially as women of color. Like, I don't want any problems, right? But sometimes things need to be addressed.
Yep.
And I will say, not to keep shouting these people out, but Kelly is amazing for creating that environment. One, mentorship. She wants all of us to live up to our expectations and our abilities based off who we are versus like what she bestows upon us. And then two, I do want to just give Joe Studer, who I don't know if you know Joe on our team here, but he creates space that I feel like for myself that I can talk to him professionally and personally in order to help drive me forward. So just want to note those two amazing humans. I know we talked about Kelly, but
yeah, no, I think that that's so true. I think so many times as human beings, when somebody says something that we find offensive or upsetting, that we automatically are like, they're racist, they're sexist, they're this. And sometimes it's not. And they just need somebody to say, like, dude, that's not okay. I know you're not a bad person, and you probably didn't mean it the way that it came across, but like, let me educate you because I care. Right.
Exactly.
There were years ago, and I won't mention it, there was a huge controversy with a really well-known guy in our industry for saying something on a stage that came across as very sexist. But he was also like in his 80s, and like that was just who he was. Like, he didn't mean it.
Right.
I personally had found him to be one of the biggest supporters of women, and just was reflecting on the time he grew up, and like that was acceptable to say back then. And people tried to cancel him, and in my way, I was like, why don't you just tell him, like, dude, it's not okay to say that anymore. I know you didn't mean it that way, but like maybe we come up with a different way to make that analogy. But people weren't willing to do that, and I think that as a society, we need to get better at realizing that most people are generally good. And when they say or do things that we find remarkably offensive or hurtful, it doesn't necessarily mean that that was the intent of the comment. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it isn't. And rather than internalizing it and deciding that that person is the worst person in the world, like, go up to them and be like, that's not okay. And let me explain to you why and how that impacted me. And so you can be better in the future.
Exactly. And then if they don't receive you, then they're the worst person.
Then they're the worst person in the world. But I do think that we are too quick to decide people are horrible and not give them benefit. None of us are perfect. We're all flawed human beings.
100%.
And in my book, I talk about that. And again, that also, to tie it all back to investing, I think that that is true a lot in investing as well. We're so quick to judge because we didn't like somebody we met associated with something, or somebody that we just know better led us to believe something that wasn't true. And that's why I think in investing and in life, you really have to rely on your own experiences and check your own biases and look for the devil's advocate case. Like, be willing to do that even when you don't feel like there's one to be made. Like, there's always one to be made. There's always a risk you missed. And also not to let those things paralyze you, and to be willing to do what you think is best because you did the work and it's where you're comfortable, and knowing that, you know, you might be wrong, but that's life. If you're not willing to take the risk, then you're not willing to get the reward that comes from it too.
I love that. I love that so much. So my last question for today, I know your book is not out yet, but like I said, once this book comes out and everyone's reading it, what do you want people to walk away with after reading your book?
That everybody's life has equipped them to be extremely proficient in some way, shape, or form, that their life experience gives them an advantage in some way that somebody else doesn't have, and it's unique to every single person. And your superpower is figuring out what that thing is. And hopefully through my book and the way that I take you through my own journey of figuring out what those things were for me, it brings you on the journey of what those things are for you. I hope that that's what people take away, and that we're all very flawed human beings, that life's really freaking short, and that living with purpose and living a life that you find joy in, not worrying about other people's joy, is actually what brings joy to the world, right? When I had my son, people used to say, like, oh, you got to put your son first. And I always used to be like, no, I have to put myself first. Because if I'm miserable, I can't be a good mom. And I think that's true in relationships too. Like if you're married, like people are like, oh, you got to put your kids. No, you got to put the relationship first, because if the relationship falls apart, that affects the kids. And like, if you're not willing to do that, if you put the kids first, then like now you're neglecting the thing that is required for the best possible joy in life. And going through life with other people is what is the greatest gift of being a human being, really, if you think about it. And so, always putting that first and making sure that you are first and foremost, you got to be happy with yourself, happy with your life, and find joy in everything you do before you can take that and build relationships with others. And I think that's true in investing, knowing who you are, figuring out what your superpower is, and how that applies to how you can have some advantage in the market through your experience is your superpower too. And that's what I hope people take away. And what I really hope is that it inspires people as investors, but as just people in general. And so that's why I wrote it the way I did. Like, you've read it, so you know how it ends. But like the end is not like this happy ending. Like I don't tie it into a pretty little bow, because that's not how life works. But like, I think everybody can relate to the book, whether
100.
you're an investor or not.
I keep saying 100% just because I'm so like in alignment. Like I'm like, are we related somehow? Because, or have you been listening to my conversations?
Yeah.
Because this is very true. And one of the things that before we end today, I do want to just pull out from what you just said, that one of the best parts of life is having humans that we love
Yeah.
around us. So all you listeners today, I hope that you enjoyed. If you have any questions, I dropped Shana's information into the chat. So follow her on LinkedIn, look out for the book in November. And I just
And
want to
pre-order it too.
pre-order
Here's a fun
it.
fact. Amazon will not recommend the book to other people until I have 500 pre-orders. Like,
Okay, let me drop your pre-order.
so if you love this conversation and are super interested in the book, no skin off your back. You do not get charged till the book comes out in November. Go and pre-order it. It will help me with Amazon and Barnes and Noble to get the word out, because I think this is a book that everybody should read and can have a positive impact on other people's lives. And so help me get there.
Yes, we will, in our follow-up, we will send the pre-order link
Awesome.
alongside it so people have that option as well. Thank you so much for joining today. I had such a great time talking with you, and I look forward to seeing you too. And good luck with everything.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.